Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. As Star Wars fans, we oftentimes criticize and make suggestions about how the film franchise can become better. So today I'm going to take a lot of fan ideas and some of my own and explain to you guys 10 ways how Disney can make Star Wars better. There's a huge crossover between Star Wars fans and gamers. And those fans haven't been given a decent game in a decade. When I was growing up, I had a wide variety of excellent story-driven Star Wars games like KOTOR, Republic Commando, Empire at War, the original Battlefront. Even the pod racing game was kind of fun. And for MMORPGs, you had Star Wars Galaxies. I never really got that much into it, but I could tell that it was a very complex and rich game. The thing was, back then, Star Wars video games went against the mold of movie video games. They were made by talented game developers and were actually fun to play. But now Star Wars games are kind of disappointing, and also a rarity. I understand that the old Republic MMORPG and new Battlefront series are designed to make money through transactions and other things, but that's just what the gaming industry has become. But where are all the single-player story-driven games? I mean, Star Wars is one of the richest and most fascinating fictional universes out there. Why aren't they creating more content for it? I mean, we did have that 1313 game, but that was canceled, and then the Visceral Adventure game that came after it was also canceled, and now supposedly EA is creating an open-world Star Wars game. And being the constant optimist, of course, I am looking forward to it despite it being connected with EA. But I can't help but be confused about why Disney isn't licensing more games. Maybe they think that quantity will lead to lower quality games. But then again, they already made Battlefront 2, which was kind of low quality to begin with, so how could it hurt to make more games? And honestly, guys, if you want to regain the trust of your fans and the gamers out there, EA, you just have to make KOTOR 3, and make it well. Outside the Clone Wars period and Galactic Civil War period, the most interesting time during Star Wars is the Old Republic. It's a period of time that occurs thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin. It's familiar to fans, but at the same time, widely different. It's a fertile ground for new adventures and epic confrontations. It's also during a time when the Sith and Jedi both fielded giant armies and had melees between thousands of force-wielding soldiers. And better yet, it happened so long ago, most of it can still be classified as legends. So creators will be able to create stories the way they want to in a less restricted way in a period of time that's designed exactly for that. Rogue One was a perfect example of a genre film set in the Star Wars universe. It didn't follow the traditional Star Wars storyline. Instead, it was a war drama within the Star Wars galaxy. And just like there's a huge cross-section between Star Wars fans and gamers, there's also a huge cross-section between Star Wars fans and war drama fans. I'm one of them. That's why some of my favorite novels in the Star Wars universe are books like the Republic Commando series, Inferno Squad, and Twilight Company. They all follow soldiers involved in the greater galactic wars. And it makes sense for Lucasfilm to explore more genres because the Star Wars galaxy isn't just about the Skywalker family, it's about an amazing setting, a universe full of stars and planets to explore. Now the recent heist-oriented solo film flopped, but I hope that doesn't deter Lucasfilm from creating more genre-specific films like this. For instance, I would love to see like a Boba Fett or Obi-Wan Western-themed Star Wars movie. That'd be really cool. Movies have always been a reflection of society's ebbs and flows, and Star Wars is no different. The original trilogy actually talks about a lot of the same political and social issues as the new trilogy. But why are fans so upset this time around? It's not really the message that's pissing people off, it's how it's being executed. Remember in 4th grade in our literature classes how our teachers would teach us how to show, don't tell in our writing? Well, let's take a look at the scene in The Last Jedi.
My sister and I grew up in a poor mining system. The First Order stripped our ore to finance their military, then shelled us to test their weapons. They took everything we had. And who do you think these people are? There's only one business in the galaxy that'll get you this rich.
I mean, this is primarily one of the reasons why a lot of people hate the character of Rose Tico. They might not even understand why they don't like her. And no, it's not Kelly Marie Tran's fault either, it's just lazy and terrible writing. Her monologue tells us exactly why she hates the First Order, why she hates everyone on Canto Bight in a cringy and cliche way that just makes the whole situation such a bore. Now let's take a look at several scenes from the original trilogy where Luke Skywalker actually has the same issues as Rose Tico does.
Uncle Owen! Aunt Beru! Uncle Owen!
But instead of having Luke complain about the Empire, we're shown how it affects his family and later on his friends. And instead of telling us how poor Luke is, we're shown his home and his very frugal way of making a living as a moisture farmer. These things all happen naturally, and it protects the film's fourth wall. It allows us to observe as impartial viewers. Monologues are very tricky to use in films, especially when you're using it to portray political messages or social messages. If it's not carried out well or organically, it oftentimes can be jarring and feel very preachy and aggressive. Film plays an important part in progressing our society, but that doesn't mean that social commentary and political commentary should take away from the story in the film. Just like the Old Republic, the prehistory period of Star Wars happened so long ago that it can be classified as canon or legends. It doesn't really matter because no one actually remembers. It was briefly explored in some comics and novels several years ago, and it gave us some very interesting stories about the beginning of the Jedi Order and how the Force has evolved over the years. It's stories like this that give Star Wars a real sense of richness and depth. It gives us a starting point for the franchise and better illustrates the evolution of many groups and factions that have sprung up and populated the Star Wars galaxy. And because it happened so long ago, it gives the audience a completely new and fresh world to explore. Less experienced directors like Rian Johnson have a lot to prove. Besides Looper, his projects are relatively unknown. And if you watch the man talk about The Last Jedi, he talks a lot about himself. He talks about his own artistic ambitions. He talks about how he wants to tell his story using Star Wars. Now, normally I'd agree, the best works of art oftentimes are created by auteurs who leave a chunk of themselves in their films. But when you're dealing with a trilogy, well actually 3 trilogies that are linked together into 9 episodes, you kind of have to sacrifice some of your own artistic vision so your story fits with the rest of the stories. The problem with directors like Rian Johnson is they have this delusion that the pursuit of their own artistic ambition, their pure artistic self, is the most important thing when it comes to making a good piece of cinema. In reality, writers and directors, they really should be servicing the story and trying to entertain their audience above all else. More experienced directors are able to understand the difference between a job and a passion project. Individuals like J.J. Abrams, Ron Howard, Tony Gilroy, these kind of directors do service the story above all else, and when they are at a depth, they know how to lean on their peers and colleagues. Just look at Player One, directed by Steven Spielberg. Do you actually think he understands all that video game terminology and culture? No, of course not. He trusts his writers and teams to help fill in the gaps as he crafts the main story. Disney needs to be more focused on hiring more experienced directors in the future. Imagine if Spielberg one day directed a Star Wars film, or maybe even Ridley Scott. That would be epic, and naturally it would star Russell Crowe as a Jedi during Order 66 who almost dies in battle, but somehow manages to survive, and then he's picked up by a slaver, and that slaver decides to make money off of him by enlisting him into gladiator fights, and Harrison Ford didn't want to be in Star Wars anymore. Plus, he was getting paid a ridiculous amount of money for each episode. So it kind of makes sense why they got rid of Han. But Mark Hamill had a much more modest salary and he actually enjoys Star Wars. He's a fan favorite. That doesn't mean he can't be placed in a mentorship role. He doesn't need to have the majority of the screen time, but it'd be nice to see him once in a while. He still has a lot of energy and passion for the franchise. I sort of got the feeling in the last movie that Disney is killing off old characters to make room for the new ones.
Let the past die.
And I think there's more than enough for both the old ones and the new ones to coexist. It just doesn't make sense to me financially for Disney to get rid of characters that fans have, invested so much time in, reading books, novels, playing video games for, 30, 40 years. Why would you do that? And that also goes for the future of the franchise as well. If you're spending all this time and money developing Finn, Rey, Kylo, and Poe, well, we better see a lot more of them in the next trilogy as well. We need more war. Well, not in real life, just in Star Wars. Before The Last Jedi happened, I was excited about the prospect of the First Order going toe-to-toe with the New Republic military. I was ready to finally see 2 well-equipped navies duke it out in space. Some of my favorite moments of the prequels were the gigantic set-piece battles. I loved watching Obi-Wan and Anakin zooming through the gigantic battle over Coruscant, or the Wookiees swinging from the trees to board droid tanks on Kashyyyk. This is the kind of action that most fans want to see. That's why Rogue One was so successful. We're once again presented with a small band of rebels facing a numerically superior evil empire. It feels like we've been here before, and more importantly, it makes the contestants in this fight very black and white. And it's the opposite of fresh, new, and risky. The Resistance is obviously the good guys, and the First Order is evil. But what if instead we had a corrupt and inefficient New Republic facing off a fascist First Order empire? There's a lot more room for gray interpretations of who's good and who's evil, and I think that's a lot more relevant in today's world. It also makes a better story. I felt like The Last Jedi was a lot less epic than previous entries into the Star Wars universe. It felt kind of tiny in scope. Star Wars is such a vast franchise and has such deep lore, yet the majority of the film takes place on a small convoy of ships. The movie doesn't really take advantage of Star Wars' natural strengths. It doesn't introduce us to new alien races or new locations as much as it really should have. When I first saw The Last Jedi, the first thing I thought was, this is Mad Max Fury Road in space. It's just one long chase scene. Rian Johnson somehow made an extremely large galaxy feel less alive and incredibly small. One of the biggest overlooked plot points is the First Order destroying the New Republic. We kind of never really get to see it. How could such a large factor in the movie not be seen on screen? At the end of the day, Disney is a business and it needs to expand its audience to new demographics. That makes sense to me. I think it's great that there's more minority characters, more female protagonists. As long as they're humans and not alien scum, I'm fine with it. But at the same time, Disney can't forget that the majority of Star Wars fans are male, and those male fans are expecting certain things in their movies. There's no reason you can't empower new demographics and grow your fan base at the same time and create content that your original fans will enjoy as well. Well guys, those are my 10 suggestions about how Star Wars can be improved. I'm sure you guys have a lot of your own suggestions. I look forward to reading them down in the comment section below. Also, a lot of you guys are telling me that you've been unsubscribed to my channel randomly or that we're not appearing in your subscription feed, so make sure you are subscribed, hit that little red button and also the little notification button next to it so that you're notified every time we create more content. Well guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.